He was bullied for having no magic, but after making a promise with his friend, he becomes determined to do whatever it takes to become the greatest mage in history. The story begins with a boy named William Surfort as he fights a monster in a dungeon because he wants to prove that he can succeed at the Rigor and Magic Academy, even though he can't use magic. He defeats the monster using his sword, but countless more appear, and he prepares to take them on, thinking he doesn't need magic to defeat them. A professor named Edward Seraphins teaches a class at the academy, and he tells William to come to the front. He asks William to use magic to start a fire, so he tries to use his wand to cast a spell, but he fails miserably, and everyone starts laughing at him. Edward silences the class, but he's surprised William can't even use basic magic, telling him he's only good at taking notes. A student named Xian shows everyone how it's done, but Edward tells him not to demonstrate his powers without permission. So he apologizes, explaining that he just wanted to help William because he couldn't complete the task. Edward freezes the fire and tells everyone that magic is everything in this world, so the students in the academy will earn respect by showing their talent for magic. He thinks those who are incapable of using magic have no place in the academy, so they should withdraw immediately. After the class, Xian asks William if he isn't embarrassed, knowing he's been going to the dungeon to defeat weak monsters. A girl named Colette comes to his rescue, and Xian wonders why she's standing up for him, so she tells him William is her friend. She mentions that he works extremely hard and is nicer than Xian, but he explains that those qualities don't make a good mage. He decides to leave because he doesn't want to waste his time around William, telling him he should just drop out. Colette tells him to ignore them, thinking something's wrong with Edward for making him a laughingstock, but he says he's okay because it's true he can't use magic. He even considers himself lucky because the incident made a cute girl worry about him. So she blushes, asking him what he wants from her, but he explains that he's just telling the truth because he has always been told he should compliment girls. So she becomes embarrassed, but she reminds herself to maintain her composure because she belongs to a noble family, even if it's just a name. She sees William staring at the sky, so she asks him if something's wrong, but he mentions that he's just admiring how beautiful the day is. We learned that a long time ago, people didn't know about the sky, and they were trapped in darkness because the world was terrorized by invaders known as the Celestial Host. But 5 wizards opposed them, and with their combined powers, they were able to defeat the Celestial Host. They cast a seal over the sky, bringing peace to the world, and the title of Magia was passed down from them ever since, but it's only given to the strongest mages. Colette wonders if the Ice Maiden is watching over them, and William imagines her sitting by her window looking out for them. In a flashback, William talks with a girl named Elferia, who tells him that the sun and moon are floating in the real sky. She thinks if they become Magia and climb to the top of the tower, they will be able to see the sunset, so they promise to climb the tower together. Elferia becomes the youngest person ever to earn the title of Magia, and she leaves for the top of the tower. But William has no talent for magic, so he's nowhere near her level, but he still works hard to fulfill his promise to her. Back in the present, we meet a professor named Worker, who scolds William for going to the dungeon alone, so he immediately apologizes, but he still wants the credit points for killing a monster. Worker gives him 2 points, but asks him if he still dreams about becoming a Magia, because he needs to advance to the Upper Institute before he can head up the tower. In order to advance, he needs to get a ridiculous amount of credit points from all 3 categories of writing, spellwork, and praxis. But since he can't use magic, he can never get the credits from spellwork. He explains that he already knows this, which is why he's working on praxis and going to the dungeon, but Worker thinks it's impossible for him to advance. He doesn't want William to worry about becoming a Magia when he might even fail to graduate, telling him he needs to earn 4 credits by the end of the week to get a passing mark. He starts to panic, and he goes through his notes to find a monster worth 4 credit points. Worker decides to help him, telling him about a monster called a Baskerville, which appeared on the 6th floor, and William hugs him, thanking him for his help. But Xian hears their conversation, and he decides to hunt the monster himself, so that William will get expelled. William reaches the 6th floor, but his companion Kiki seems worried. So he tells her everything's going to be fine. He mentions they just have to avoid the monster's flaming breath, and he's depending on her nose to guide them. We see Xian with his friends, as they also enter the 6th floor. He's about to explain his plan, but they're suddenly attacked by a powerful monster called an evil sentinel, which is worth 10 credit points. It punches one of them and sends him flying into a wall, so Shion's friend panics, and William hears him scream, so he immediately goes to find them. As he reaches them, he sees Shion struggling, trying to attack the monster with his fire magic, but it has no effect. William wonders if he should help, because Shion has always bullied him, but he suddenly remembers how Alferia used to think he was braver than anyone. So he decides to jump into battle, blocking the monster's sword before it can reach Shion. Meanwhile, Edward approaches Worker, telling him to use his familiar to find Shion's group, because they went into the dungeon without permission. He wonders what floor they're on, so Edward reveals that they're on the 6th floor, and Worker tells him to relax, because William is also there. William fights the monster head-on, and he manages to land a hit, but it fights on, smashing the ground. He moves around it with ridiculous speed, and he manages to land a decisive blow, as Shion watches the fight, and he can't believe he's watching the same William he's been bullying. Worker and Edward also watch the fight, and Edward is shocked by William's strength. Worker explains that even though William can't use magic, he possesses superhuman strength and durability, and he even has the ability to understand his enemy's strategies after seeing them once. The monster tries to kill him, but he dodges the attack and slices off its arm. It fires an energy blast, but William slashes through it and cuts the monster in half. He asks Shion if he's okay, but he's upset because he was saved by someone with no magic, and Edward is furious because he can't believe William has a power that surpasses magic. The next day, William reports to Worker, who gives him 10 credit points, and William is happy since he won't be expelled anymore. In a flashback to 5 years earlier, we see the students talking about William, thinking he was only admitted to the academy so they could lure Alferia. But she has already become a magia, so he's no longer needed, and they think he's about to get expelled. He goes with Worker, and they meet the headmaster named Cauldron, who gives him a knife, and attacks him with fire spells, but he destroys all of them. She's impressed by his skills, so she allows him to continue attending at the academy. But he starts crying, wondering if he will ever be able to reach Alferia, and she thinks it might be possible if he keeps working hard. We return to the present, as Worker gives a lecture, and he explains the concept of ascending the tower, saying it means advancing to the upper institute to become one of the magia at the top floor. To ascend the tower, the mages can create a new type of magic, or earn 7,200 credits from the academy. Worker explains that most of the students use credits to advance, but he yells at them because everyone in the class is on the verge of failing. After the class, Colette joins William, knowing he has earned every credit in writing, but Worker is still hard on him, and he tells her it's because he failed spell work. He thinks Worker is a great teacher since he's giving them supplementary lessons, saying other professors don't even care if they fail. They run into Shion, as his friends tell everyone that he defeated an evil sentinel, but he knows he didn't do it. He sees William, and he grabs him, wondering why he's so powerful, despite having no talent for magic, but Colette interferes, and he decides to leave him alone. Meanwhile, Edward goes to Cauldron, telling her to expel William, but she doesn't think it would be fair, since he's in his last year. Edward thinks there's no place in the academy for someone who can't use magic, so she shows him William's records, and explains that he's exceptional in everything except for magic. So even if he can't become a magia, there are other options available for him. She explains that the academy needs to produce scholars for the fated day, but Edward thinks the problem is that William doesn't want to become a scholar because he's planning to become a magia. So she tells Edward to test him, and after seeing how he performs, Edward can decide what to do with him. William apologizes to Colette because he needs to bring her with him to open his locker, but as she opens it, she sees his sword, and he mentions that he doesn't have the permission to carry it around the campus. They head to the study hall, where William starts reading about dwarves, and Colette thinks he doesn't have to work so hard, because he's already good at writing. But he knows that if he loses even 1 credit point, he won't be able to ascend the tower, and he wants to learn about the dwarves, saying he can relate to them, because they never gave up no matter the situation. Colette sees William's white hair, and thinks it's because he works too hard. She wants to pull it out, but they're suddenly interrupted by Edward, who tells William to come to the spell hall alone. As they reach the hall, Edward explains that he's going to give William a supplementary lesson, because he always fails the spellwork class. Edward starts using dark magic, telling William he needs to land a hit to pass the test, and Edward explains that if he succeeds, he will receive 5 credit points for his spellwork class, but he will have to leave the academy if he fails. Workner goes to Cauldron, who shows him the fight between Edward and William, so he's shocked, wondering what's going on. But she forbids him from stopping them, and explains that since she heard what he had to say in favor of William, she must also recognize Edward's concerns equally. She reveals that she allowed him to make the decision of William's future in the academy, but Workner thinks it's too cruel, because Edward is the closest person to becoming a Magia, and even though he was defeated, he still managed to reach the top of the tower. He tries to hit William with his dark magic, and William dodges the attacks, but he's shocked by how powerful it is, knowing Edward only used a low-level spell. He goes on the offensive, trying to land a kick, but Edward stops him with a barrier, thinking he's hopeless. Edward hits William with his black flames, and William is shocked by how quickly he's using his spells, because he's casting them without incantations. He tells William that he's only going to use his black flames to attack, and make a shield to protect himself, saying he will make him feel despair just by using 2 spells. He starts overlapping his spells, and William tries to get out of the way, but he still gets hit, realizing he can't beat Edward, but he thinks he might have been able to put up a fight if he had his sword. Meanwhile, Colette goes to the locker room, and she thinks Edward might be torturing William. Kiki suddenly arrives, and Colette realizes she's injured, but she just claws at William's locker. We return to the fight, as Edward talks about the Battle of Garanzo, where the dwarves prepared an army of 10,000 soldiers, but it only took 1 mage to defeat them. He steps on William's head, telling him to give up on his dreams, because a sword can never become as strong as a wand, but he still wants to become a Magia. Edward wonders what's driving him so hard to achieve an impossible goal, so he mentions that he wants to be with the person he loves. He thinks William is an idiot, but he explains that even if his reason sounds ridiculous to him, he still won't give up. Colette suddenly arrives, giving him his sword, and Edward attacks with his black flames, but is surprised when William slashes through it. He prepares to shoot a barrage of his black flames once again, and William worries about getting hit. But he charges in, and as he dodges the attack, he thinks about how in the Battle of Garanzo, there was one dwarf who never gave up, and managed to land a hit on the mage. William jumps up to the ceiling, and he rushes at Edward with incredible speed, shattering his barrier, and he manages to land a hit. So Edward leaves, giving William the 5 credit points as promised, and Cauldron is impressed that he was able to succeed. William goes around the city to distribute newspapers, and he trips on the stairs, but he manages to catch all of the newspapers except one. As he goes to pick it up, he sees the news that Alferia has invented a new magic, making her the first person to come up with 12 original spells. He reads on, realizing that the Upper Institute has issued an order to the Academy, and the client is Alferia herself. William goes to his dorm, and asks his roommate Rosti if he can prepare a magic item for him. He wonders why William is in such a rush, and he mentions that the order came from Alferia, so he needs to get there quickly. He explains that he doesn't have classes today, so he's going to prioritize completing the order, and Rosti wonders if the job is difficult. So William reveals he just needs to collect some Frostwalker cores, saying Alferia needs magic catalysts, and all students who help her will be compensated. He explains that he's going to the 4th floor, which is why he needs Rosti's magic items, and he gives William what he needs. Before he can leave, Rosti gives him a piece of bread, telling him to take care of himself. A large number of students turn up in the dungeon, but William already expected it, because it was an order from Alferia. He's about to start hunting, when he's startled because of Shion's attack. Everyone praises him, but he isn't satisfied, as he remembers how amazing William was when he fought the evil Sentinel. But William is impressed by Shion, and he decides to go deeper into the dungeon, thinking Shion might defeat all the monsters in the area. He comes across a girl named Iris, who's about to be attacked by 3 monsters, but he comes to her rescue, slicing them in half. She's shocked that he saved her with a sword, instead of using magic, and she thanks him for protecting her. Meanwhile, Workner tells the students that creating new magic is such a great achievement that it guarantees one's advancement in the tower. He mentions that magic is named after the person who invents it, so if they're able to create a new one, their names will forever be remembered in history, but the students know it isn't easy to invent magic. One of them wonders how strong Alferia is, and Workner mentions that she's one of the most powerful mages in history. Colette thinks Alferia is amazing, and her friend tells her she's jealous that Alferia will steal William from her, so she becomes embarrassed. In the dungeon, William tells Iris who he is, and he wonders if she feels any hatred toward him since he can't use magic. But she tells him she has no reason to hate him, reminding him that he just saved her life. He asks her if she's also there due to Alferia's order, and she explains that she wants to be of help to Amagia because she also wants to become one. He thinks about how they don't know what the real sky looks like because it's covered by an enormous barrier created by the Magia, which is protecting the world from invaders. According to legend, if the barrier falls, the world will once again be covered with darkness, and the calamity will begin. So the students follow the orders of Magia, thinking it will help them support the sky. Iris mentions the time she was surrounded by monsters and was preparing for death, but Alferia saved her by freezing all of them. She became a fan of Alferia ever since, so she wants to help her by acting on her order, but she hasn't even found a Frostwalker, and she's starting to think the other students have already defeated them. William tells her that when Frostwalkers move, they leave ice fragments behind. But the fragments he found are double the size of normal ones, which means there's a powerful Frostwalker up ahead, and it's in a place where everyone's search magic can't detect it. She wonders how he knows so much when he can't even use magic, and he tells her spells are amazing, but it isn't absolute, especially inside a dungeon. A monster suddenly appears, and it's about to smash Iris, but William saves her, and she sees that it's a Frost Rex, which is the highest form of a Frostwalker worth 6 credit points. It fires a laser beam, which freezes everything in its path, but William manages to evade. He tells Iris to stay put, but she stops him since she doesn't think physical attacks will work on the monster. She recognizes it as the dwarf killer, knowing it freezes everything it touches, so they need to defeat it using long-range magic spells. But he's confident in his abilities because he has defeated the monster before, so he rushes towards it as it shoots its laser again, but it misses William. It starts destroying the dungeon as William throws the magic item he got from Rosti, and it hooks onto the monster. He wraps the rope around its body, and it starts freezing everything, but William knows it's weak against fire attacks. So he sets the rope on fire, causing a massive explosion, which blows the monster into pieces. Iris is shocked by how powerful he is, and she wonders how she should report the fight, because he's completely different from the rumors about him. After that, Iris meets the Magia, and we learn that they sent her to find someone capable of helping them. They know that if they're attacked by the celestial hosts now, they won't be able to stop it, so they need all the help they can get. She tells them William is the only interesting prospect she found, but the Magia have different opinions on whether to let him in. There are 2 that argue and they prepare to fight, but another one stops them, saying the Grand Festival is about to start, so they will make their decision after seeing the results. We learn that there are a total of 12,000 credit points available at the Academy, and we see the students fighting against golems in a test. Shion and Colette are able to defeat their golems and pass, but we see William struggling. He thinks about punching it, but the other students make fun of him, and he ends up getting hit, and they think he's a failure. We see 2 of the top students, Wignall and Liana, as they easily overwhelm their golems, allowing them to pass. Another boy named Julius appears, firing multiple ice shards that hit all the other golems, and they turn into roses. He activates his spell, and they are all completely encased in ice, so he also passes. He meets with the other 2, and he declares his intent to beat them, saying he has acquired a new method, and they tell him they will be looking forward to it. Everyone admires them, since they are the only students with over 10,000 credit points, and William thinks about how he doesn't even have enough to graduate, as we see he only has around 5,000. He feels depressed, and Julius suddenly walks past, telling him he's in the way. Julius's friends are impressed he passed with a single spell, so they think he will definitely get scouted at the Grand Festival. Colette has lunch with William, and she tells him the festival is also his chance to get scouted, because trying to advance without spell work is unrealistic. She mentions how it's possible to advance even if he doesn't have enough credit points, as long as he gets scouted. We learn that the Grand Festival is an event held every 2 years, where there are a number of different competitions, and there are high mages that come down from the tower as scouts. Colette mentions the festival is basically a contest between the students from the different tower factions. There are 5 factions for the different elements, and each is led by a magia, and if they can be chosen by one of the factions, they are guaranteed to become a tower member, but William thinks it's unlikely, because he would also need to perform a feat of amazing magic. So Colette mentions there are also people called Watchers, and they are also able to take talented people to the tower, but William thinks they don't really exist. He thinks he shouldn't try to stand out since he has no magic, remembering how he participated in the last festival, but everyone just thought he was cheating, and he's still traumatized from the experience, so he decides to just help out behind the scenes. They see all the other students practicing, and Colette mentions there will also be scouts coming from other capitals, so there will be other opportunities besides going to the tower, and she tells him to promote himself. She helps him with his locker, but she suddenly senses something, seeing that someone cast a barrier along with sound-dampening magic. She gets Kiki to take a look, and she's able to dispel the barrier. They open the locker, and it turns out to lead to a hidden stairway, so they decide to check it out. We see other students inside, and they turn out to be placing bets on who will win the events of the festival. William sees that Xian is also there, and as he prepares to insult William, Colette tells him to back off. William wonders what he's doing there, and we learn he's there to see the odds on himself, and he's annoyed that everyone only cares about the top 3. He mentions he's only behind them because he lost some credits in the writing exams, but he thinks he's on par with them in terms of magical skill. After their next class, Colette asks William if he's busy, but he mentions he needs to work, so she becomes depressed. We see him working at Gina's tavern, where he serves a dwarf named Donan. He's surprised by how hardworking he is, since he delivers the newspaper and also works here at night, but he notes that since he doesn't qualify for a scholarship, he needs to work to pay for it. Rosti is also helping out, and he thinks it's fun working without using magic. We learn William asked him to help because the other part-timer quit, and everyone seems to like having William around. As they clean up, Rosti wonders why he works here, because Worker would be able to get him a better job, but he mentions he doesn't want to trouble him, and he likes hanging out with the dwarves. He accidentally drops his spoon, and as he goes to pick it up, Julius enters the tavern. He thinks the place is a dump, but his friends mention there's nowhere else that's open. As William stands up, Julius is surprised to see him, saying he fits right in with the savages. Donan is offended hearing this, but Julius calls them an inferior race who had to come from another world. He tells Donan to know his place, and we learn that the dwarves' world was destroyed by the celestial host, and they escaped to this world. But they aren't well regarded here since they can't use magic. So if a dwarf were to lay their hands on a mage, it would instantly threaten their standing. Rosti serves them a bean dish, but the boys laugh at it, thinking it isn't fit to be eaten. They continue to insult the dwarves, but William confronts them, telling them to take back everything they said. He tells them that the dwarven beans are grown from barren soil, so it's the culmination of their wisdom, and proof they survived even in the harshest conditions, but Julius kicks the dish away, and it lands on William. The 2 boys prepare to mess with him, but he instantly smashes them both into the ground. He thinks that they are the ones who are savages, and Julius decides to get serious. William dodges his ice, but he ends up getting pinned to the wall. Julius creates a rose on his chest, and as he prepares to activate it, Donan tells him to stop. But seeing the look on William's face, he changes his mind, telling him to join the grand festival so he can humiliate him in front of everyone. Donan thinks it's a bad idea, but William agrees, telling him to apologize to Donan and the others if he wins. The grand festival begins, and the first event is the Sky Race, where we see Liana ahead of everyone on her dragon, and the other participants struggle to keep up with her. The students in the audience are amazed by her skills, and they think she's sure to win. Cauldron notes that the tower scouts are already in the stands analyzing everything, and Iris believes it's because mages from outside the tower are also there to find talent. Liana wins the Sky Race for the 2nd year in a row and sets a new record, making everyone understand why she's one of the top 3. Iris puts on her glasses and excuses herself, telling Cauldron that there's someone she wants to cheer for. Xian's friends wish him luck for the next event, and they tell him that even though they didn't qualify, they will still cheer for him. He thanks them, and remembers how Colette requested him to join her team, so he rushes to find her, believing that she will always choose him over William. But when he finds her, he's stunned to see William with her, and she reveals they were short on credit points and needed him on their team to fill the gap. He's frustrated that a loser like William is participating in the event and that they're on the same team, so he yells at him, but William ignores him and stares at Julius, who passes behind him. Colette reveals that William wants to defeat Julius, but Shion is angry for being ignored. The festival host, named Mike, announces the beginning of the afternoon events, and he introduces Edward as his guest commentator, calling him the most hated teacher in the academy, but Edward asks if he wants to die. Mike announces that the next competition is the Crown Attack, which is also the main event of the festival, and it will be played in teams of 3, so he tells the elf faction to get to work, and they use their magic to create 5 zones around the stadium. Mike mentions that the teams will begin on the outside, and they must get through the zones, which contain a variety of traps and obstacles set by the professors, and the winner will be the first team that makes their way to the stadium and reaches the crown. He mentions it's a battle royale, so the teams can also attack each other. Edward mentions they will be looking at how they work as a team, telling them to treat it as if it were a real dungeon dive. Mike mentions that all the top students are participating in this event, but the favorites to win are Wignall and Julius. He mentions he has bet all his savings on Wignall, but he also wants to watch Colette's squad, since they have Shion, but also William, and the other students can't believe that William is competing, thinking he's crazy. Werner is also shocked to see him in the event, reminding him to avoid it, but William is determined to win. The teams take their positions, and the competition begins. All the teams rush forward, but they are immediately faced with countless golems that block their path. William rushes ahead, but the other students think it's useless, remembering how he couldn't even scratch a golem during their exam. But William calls for Colette's help, and she uses her magic to create an earth gauntlet for him, which he uses to blow one of the golems away, clearing a path for them. His strength leaves the audience shocked, and Colette mentions that even though William can't use magic, he isn't breaking the rules if he uses a magic gauntlet. Shion thinks about when William saved him, which made him disgusted with himself, so he trained himself until he almost died, but he realizes that William is still stronger than him. Their squad takes the lead, and they're the first ones into the Badland Zone, where there are giant cubes that attack with stone bullets, but William punches the ground, which raises a shield to block the attacks. He calls for Colette's help again, and she uses her earth magic to create a number of swords for him. He starts throwing them at the cubes, destroying them one by one, but he misses one of them, and he finishes it off by slashing it. Mike announces that they are ahead of everyone, while Shion's friends cope by saying it's all thanks to Colette's magic. The scouts are amazed by how fast William is, and Edward thinks it's his knowledge and experience that allows him to move with efficiency, while his reflexes allow him to attack so quickly, and Iris cheers for him to win. Meanwhile, 2 of the other teams are eliminated because they can't handle the traps, and Julius notices noise from the stadium, so his team reveals that William's squad is in the lead, but he tells them not to worry. William's team reaches the final zone called the Enchanted Woods, and after crossing it, they will reach the stadium, but they are suddenly surrounded by circle traps. He instantly cuts all of them, changing their directions so that they attack themselves. Mike wonders what Edward thinks, since he was the one who set up those traps, but he just seems annoyed. William approaches the stadium, but he knows that the closer they get, the more likely they will be to run into another team, so he decides to take a different route, and goes ahead of everyone to set a trap for Julius, but he is suddenly attacked by ice, as we see that Julius is already there. William wonders if he's alone, but Julius unleashes his next attack, throwing countless ice beams at William, but Shion starts melting the ice, and he starts to cast a powerful spell, but he uses it on William, and Colette barely makes a shield in time. There's a huge explosion which destroys the forest, and Shion tells Julius to go away, because he doesn't want anyone to interrupt his fight with William, while Colette and William can't believe their own teammate is acting so childish. Shion mentions he tried to be a good person for Colette, but he can't take it anymore. Julius suddenly creates a giant ice wall, trapping Colette behind it. William worries about her, but he's attacked by Shion and he loses his sword. He tells Shion it's not the time to fight, but he insists on it, telling him to pick up his sword. In a flashback, we learn the other students used to make fun of William since he didn't have any talent with magic, but Shion didn't like it, so he decided to take William as his underling, but William just ignored him, which made him angry, and ever since that day, he has despised William. Back in the present, William dodges Xian's attacks and hides behind a tree, but he unleashes his flame whip, which grabs William's leg and lifts him up, but he cuts the rope and saves himself. Xian notes that jumping and dodging his attacks won't do much. Xian invites him to attack, but William mentions their teammates, and he made a promise to Donan and the others to punish Julius, so he needs to fight him instead. Xian gets angry, telling William that if he doesn't fight back, he will destroy him, making him wonder if fighting is the only option left. Meanwhile, the audience becomes aware of the fight, and Mike asks Edward for his take on the situation. He reveals fighting with your own teammates is against the rules of the event, and the Tower Scouts will see it as a significant mark against them. Mike is surprised to see that Edward is happy about the fight between Xian and William, while others are upset about Xian's stupid decision to start a fight with his own team. Kiki is worried to see what's happening, while Rosti also wonders about the situation. Iris joins them, and she starts to cheer for William. Rosti mentions it's unexpected to see her cheer for one person in particular, because he thought she would be cheering for the crowd's favorite, so she reveals she wasn't interested in William initially, but she has become obsessed with him. She wonders if Rosti is also a fan, so he mentions that he loves William more than anything, since they're also roommates. Meanwhile, Colette rushes to stop William and Xian, but she finds Julius, who tells her to stop running, or else people will think she isn't suitable for her title as the Earth Princess. She gets angry and warns him to shut his mouth, but Julius attacks with his ice, so she defends herself, but we see he was just triggering a trap, and there's a huge blast. The audience is confused as they watch, and realize that Julius is in several places at once, confronting each of the other squads. Wignall is happy to see him, and Julius reminds him of his declaration to deal with him, but Wignall uses his wind magic, and we see that it was just a clone made from ice. Mike is happy to see Wignall beating Julius, since his money is on the line, but the scout from the elf faction named Phildus mentions that Wignall is average, because he neither exceeds nor fails to meet their expectations. She wants to go home since she's an introvert, but her companion Lafia tells her she can't leave, because they need to report the events to Lady Eleanor. Meanwhile, William wonders why Xian is so fixated on fighting him. He remembers the time when he used to get bullied, and he was aware that he was the biggest failure, so he didn't want Xian to take his side, because he thought it was selfish, and he also didn't want to shift away from his goal of meeting Elfaria. Xian shoots at him and he runs away, but Xian uses his magic to call his guardian, which is a flaming falcon. The falcon rushes towards William, but he cuts its wing using his sword, and runs at Xian to attack him. But the falcon follows him, and he thinks he needs to cut through the falcon's core to destroy it, or else it won't stop. The falcon regenerates its wing and shoots fire at William, which he dodges, but Xian attacks him from the front. He blocks it using his gauntlet, and even though he is being attacked from all directions, he still manages to save himself. But Edward is impressed by Xian, who he thinks has surpassed the level of a student, because he can use high-level fire magic, while also calling his guardian. The scout from the fire faction recognizes Xian's strength, thinking that even though he has less credit points than the top 3, the festival has allowed him to stand out, and he tells his companion to report to Lord Cariot that they have found an unexpected talent. William asks why Xian is after him, so he reveals that even the sight of him irritates him, because his resolve to never give up infuriates him. He felt he was always ignored, and William never even looked at him, even though he was better than him at magic. He doesn't care what William's situation is, and he's determined to just crush him once and for all. William is shocked to learn how Xian feels, and he thinks about the time he told Xian to leave him alone. He thought it would have been selfish to ask Xian to become his friend since he was a loser, but deep down he also wanted the recognition. He realizes Xian acknowledges him, so he decides to take him on. Xian is happy to see him looking at him, and he prepares to use a wide-scale attack magic. He sends his falcon to attack, and William faces it head-on, and he manages to cut through the Guardian's core. He rushes at Xian, who prepares his final attack, but Colette suddenly creates a wall to stop them. William wonders what happened to Julius, so she mentions she beat him and he disappeared. Xian gets embarrassed seeing her clothes, but she blames him since he started the fight. She tells William to go after Julius, saying she can handle Xian. He tells her not to get in his way, but she just starts yelling at him. William gives her his jacket and thanks her for everything, which makes her blush. He tells Xian they will fight another time, but he heads to the stadium and Xian tells him to come back. Meanwhile at the stadium, the crowd waits to see who will be the first to arrive, and Julius's group appears. There seems to be no one left to challenge them, but William suddenly comes flying in, and he crashes in right behind them, challenging Julius to a fight. Meanwhile in the tower, we see Alferia by the window, as her attendant Sarissa comes to find her, but she realizes she's sleeping. Alferia wonders what she wants, so Sarissa gives her the reports from their scouts, telling her to consider Julius, because he could become her successor for the Ice faction. At the stadium, Julius is happy to see William, because he wouldn't have been satisfied winning without humiliating him, but William says he doesn't plan on losing. Julius covers the area with a mist, so William relies on sensing their magic. He realizes they're surrounding him, and he gets attacked from behind, but he dodges all their attacks. He charges through the mist and finds Julius, but he gets attacked by a fourth ice spell. He wonders where it came from, and Julius reveals they haven't even moved, as William realizes he was fighting against Julius's clones. Julius blows one of them up, freezing William in place, and Worker is shocked seeing Julius's magic, because the cloning spell is one of the 12 original spells that Alferia created. William wonders how he can use it, but he says he's just built different, saying he's on the level of the Magia, declaring that he will one day take everything from Alferia. William gets mad and breaks free, but he gets attacked from all sides by the clones. Julius uses another spell, and the clones suddenly converge, and they form a barrier that traps William. Julius summons an enormous ice crater, and he uses it to crush William. Edward is impressed he won without even moving from his place, and Julius calls out to the scouts, boasting about having perfected Alferia's magic, and telling them that he will become her successor. But the ice suddenly cracks, and William is able to get free, thanking Julius for cooling his head, since he got worked up after he mentioned Alferia. Julius prepares to humiliate him further, launching another attack, but William dodges it, and he knocks out Julius's two friends. He notes that Julius hasn't perfected Alferia's spell, and the clones suddenly start to shatter, revealing that Julius was using his friends to help control the clones. He tells Julius he's not even close to Alferia's level, and we see Alferia considering him, but she notes that she's not looking for a successor, but rather a sword that can be by her side. Julius creates more clones to surround William, but he's able to read their attacks. Julius knows he isn't good enough to control 4 clones yet, but he thinks they can act as decoys, since they look exactly like him, but William suddenly charges at his real body, so he creates a wall, but he gets pushed back. He wonders how William could tell, so he notes that the clones have a negative body temperature, and when they aren't controlled correctly, the ice seeps out from their feet. Julius wonders how someone with no talent could know more about the spell than him, so William mentions how he grew up with Alferia at the orphanage. He admired and studied her magic, but he was never able to reach her. Alferia thinks that his hard work will pay off, and he tells Julius he knows everything about her magic. William reveals that Alferia created the spell when she was only 2, telling him it's nothing to brag about, so he falls to his knees, realizing he was on the level of an infant. He starts to laugh, refusing to lose, and he summons even more clones, deciding to win with sheer force, but William reveals he used to get bullied by Alferia, who had even more clones. Julius launches his attack, but William dodges it, and he stabs one of the clones. Julius gets scared and runs, ordering the clones to attack, but William blocks everything, and he takes them out one by one. He throws his sword to destroy the last clone, and he delivers the finishing blow on Julius. The crowd can't believe he was able to win, and Colette and Xian finally make it to the stadium. They just need to grab the crown, but we see Wignall taking it, and Mike is excited to see this. The event comes to an end, and Alferia asks Sarissa if there's a magic that can go back in time, revealing that she wasn't bullying William with her clones, but just wanted to play with him all by herself. Xian can't believe William was able to beat Julius, but he swears to be the one to defeat him. William apologizes for not getting the crown, but Colette is just glad to see he's okay, and William is happy he was able to keep his promise. But that's where this video ends. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.